Does anyone else remember those divinely soft, if slightly chemical tasting, frosted sugar cookies from the grocery store bakery counter? Of course you do. I remember Shaw's used to have a cookie club where you could get free ones by presenting the hair-netted bakers with a punch card on every visit. They were paper, and I used to lose mine a lot. It was kind of sad. But a minute for their brilliant marketing tactic. They used to sweet talk kids into coming to the grocery store with their parents, where they would inevitably add all these unsanctioned extras to the cart, all just by giving me a cookie. But anyways, those plush cookies were my kryptonite. They probably still would be if you let me loose in a Star Market bakery. But now we're grown-ups, and we deserve equally cozy and nostalgic, but better tasting cookies. And that is why we have Mallory Oniki, online creator and author of the Cookie Club Cookbook, on the show today. A warning, you may want to hit pause and run to the fridge to take some butter out to soften. Because you guys, after this chat, you're going to want to get baking.
This could happen to you. This could happen to you. This could happen to you.
I wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Not From Concentrate newsletter on Substack. Subscribe for free to stay up to date on new episodes and get access to giveaways and bonus content. I also want to give a special shout out to my paid subscribers who get new, wildly delicious and distraction-proof recipes delivered to their inboxes every month, as well as essays and tips for cooking with a busy brain. Plus, paid subscribers get access to my full recipe archive. Head to catherinesmart.com to become a free or paid subscriber, and thank you for supporting the show. Mallory Oniki, welcome to Not From Concentrate.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk cookies with you and other food and more about your life too. But I should say that I started by getting on the Palatable Life and making some chocolate chip cookies 2 nights ago, and they were delicious. So thank you for that motivation. Sometimes I need some outside motivation to get baking, and that was, welcome. My whole family is very grateful to you for this.
That's what I want to hear. That's perfect.
So I'd love to get started. So many people do know about you and your wonderful food blog and your upcoming cookbook. But for folks who are not familiar with your, food creator life, can you give a little bit of background of just how you got started?
So I have been doing this for 5 years, which sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but I did not have a background in food. I thought about going to culinary school when I was an undergrad, but just was busy and working and going to school, and so it never really happened. But I always had a passion for food, was making food all the time growing up. My parents were always teaching me how to cook and how to bake, and it was really involved. We were always eating cuisines from all over the world, which was really formative for me growing up. And then when I was an undergrad, I was studying finance, but still loved food. And so that's when I got into creating my own recipes, because I was a broke college student, but I still wanted to eat really well. So I would buy cheap ingredients and then just challenge myself to open my fridge and make something with it without using a recipe. And that was really helpful for helping me learn how to develop a recipe and learn how ingredients worked. Because, I had always, made family recipes or recipes from cookbooks, but that was when I really started exploring that side of it. And that's about when I started my website, but it was very casual for the first 2 or 3 years because I was an undergrad. I was posting 2 or 3 recipes a year. It was very much a hobby. And then my last semester of undergrad is when COVID hit, which is a similar story to a lot of creators that I know. We had a lot of time on our hands, and I just started casually posting more on Instagram. That's when I got a TikTok, and my second video on TikTok was me making an avocado rose. It's an abysmal video now if I watch it back, but it went viral and I got 3 million views on this video. And I thought, okay, maybe I should keep doing this thing. And it was still, kind of a hobby, but then beginning of 2021, things had taken off enough and my platforms had grown enough that I started doing it semi full time that year. And I've been doing it full time ever since. But one of the catalysts of that growth was I started this series that I called Cookies Inspired by TV Shows and Movies. And so I would do exactly what the title implies. I would take a movie or TV show that people loved and then create a cookie that had something to do with some elements of the show. And that series went absolutely viral every time. My most well-known cookie from that series, and still probably my most made cookie for my website, was Gilmore Girls coffee cake cookie. So it was a coffee cake base with the streusel on the top, and it still probably today has like 50 million views. Like, it just went absolutely viral. It brings in the most traffic on my website every month. Like, it just really resonated with people. I think people love Gilmore Girls, but then they also just really loved the cookie flavor. It's just a great cookie. And so that's really what put me on the map. And so since then, cookies have been a through line of my content. And, you know, I've always shared all kinds of food, savory, sweet, everything in between. But cookies were always a consistent thing. And that series went for a little while and stopped, but it actually continues again in the book, which is really fun. But cookies have always been a constant thing for me. So it's been a really, really fun journey. And when the opportunity came to me to write a cookbook, it felt so obvious. Like, of course, it's going to be about cookies. So it's been a really fun journey. And I'm so excited that it'll be out soon. And yeah.
Congratulations. I'm so excited for you. And yes, I had heard about the Gilmore Girls cookie and I can't wait to make it. I didn't have the ingredients and we just had a crazy snowstorm in Boston. So that's why we ended up with the chocolate chip ones. But, you know, I talk a lot about creativity on this podcast and what sparks it. That's a really big part of, you know, what we're trying to dive into here. And that is such a cool and different place to get it from TV shows. I know that's only one of these like sort of mini projects within your other projects, but can you talk a little bit about, you know, why you went there and like how those TV shows sparked creativity for you and why you thought that was the place to put them? Was it a cookie?
Yeah, so I felt like I was kind of in a slump with my content at the time, and I just wasn't really sure what I was doing. And so I just was brainstorming one day, and I was like, well, what if I made a cookie? And I think the first one was to do with Stranger Things. So we must have been watching some episode of Stranger Things so many years ago. And I thought, well, what if I make an Eggo waffle cookie? And the cookies just seemed like the easiest dessert to modify or to make really creative, but then still have it be really approachable for people. And that's something that I've loved about cookies and loved about developing this book is there's so many different flavors, and there's things for everyone, no matter what level you're on. So I think that's what initially drew me to cookies for that series. It's something that I knew how to do and how to develop. I mean, I've come a long way, but I knew how to develop it somewhat at the beginning and was something that could be really creative. And it kind of was similar to the idea of like opening my fridge and seeing what I had and developing a recipe. Like when you pour your attention into a TV show or movie, you're trying to find something that will work, or what can I tie in here or there, like the Eggo waffles thing. It was like, okay, Eggo waffles are a consistent food through line of Stranger Things. How can I turn that into a cookie? And so I think it was a maple cookie with Eggo waffles mixed in, and some of them were more obvious. Like I did a Parent Trap one that was peanut butter Oreo because they love peanut butter Oreos, but just trying to find some element. And I think a lot of it is nostalgia of, you know, taking these movies or TV shows that we grew up watching, or like Gilmore Girls, they feel very cozy and nostalgic. And then when you add a cookie to that, it feels even more cozy and nostalgic. So that I think is why I got drawn to that idea.
Awesome. And I'm definitely going to get to the book. I'm so excited to talk about it. We also have the same publisher. I have a book coming out with DK next year. But before I jump ahead to that, I have had so many cookbook authors, food writers, more of like my elder millennial ilk on this podcast. And you're one of the first people that I've had on that really came up in the creator space. And that was your platform. Whereas a lot of the folks I talked to were like, how do we figure this out? This new thing. But I imagine there's some really intense pressure and stress and unknowns with these platforms that are changing all the time. And the algorithms are changing and the ownership is changing. And I'm curious, how do you approach that as a creator and now someone who that's your full-time business? Like, how do you think about that piece of the puzzle, which is so different than just tapping into the nostalgia and the cooking itself?
Totally. I think you have to figure out a way to detach yourself from the analytics, from the numbers. And you can't completely detach yourself because a lot of your business is reliant on how these videos are doing. So you can't just completely forget it. But I've had to learn how to not connect my worth to how my videos are doing, because I think that's a very natural thing to connect at least part of your worth to how your work is doing. And so it's so tricky when your work is social media and how other people are perceiving your content and how the algorithm is boosting those things and things that you have some control over, but mostly have no control over. And so I've had to do a lot of inner work of knowing and learning that I am more than the numbers on my page, but it still is hard. Like, I'd like to say I'm over it and it never affects me, but it affects me all the time. And I feel like when things aren't performing well, then I feel like I'm not doing something right or whatever. But you just have to, it takes a lot of mental fortitude. You have to keep pushing on and keep posting and hope that you can make it through this slump. But it really is a lot of up and down. And so it takes a lot of mental fortitude. And I do think social media as a job is very easy in a lot of ways and something that people should not complain about. But I do think it is really mentally tough. And sometimes you get feedback from people that don't like what you're doing or how your videos are, or whatever, random things like that. So you kind of have to develop a tough skin for that as well.
I imagine. And then in addition to having to be tough, you have to be open and vulnerable because that's what your community connects to. So I also wanted to hear, who is the bulk of your community? What is your relationship like with folks who are, resonating with your videos?
I think that I appeal a lot to home cooks that are excited about cooking, but maybe don't have a ton of experience. I think my recipes are on that line of very approachable, but maybe push your skills a little bit, but still keeping you comfortable in the kitchen. And so it's been really fun to interact with people. And, the best part of my job is getting DMs from people or feedback from people or comments on my website of people that have made these things and enjoyed it with their family, or my recipes have helped them learn how to bake. And so I feel like I've stayed in that area where it's still very approachable, but maybe helps you push those skills a little bit.
Agreed. I'm not a baker and I'm very excited to make a lot of your cookies. And I'm going to jump around a lot. As you might notice, that's sort of my style. But I want to now shift to some of the more practical baking stuff. You have this type of cookie called a chilled cookie, like sort of a category. I was just salivating. And Mallory, it was freezing in my house. Snowstorm outside, my heat was being a little wonky, and I'm like, why? Like, despite all of this, all I want is one of these chilled cookies. So can you talk about what a chilled cookie is, why we should make it, and how that became a part of your catalog?
I am a huge fan of chilled cookies, and I think everyone needs to try one at least once, and then I think you'll be sold. But kind of where the idea came from, growing up, my grandma loved to make sugar cookies, and she would always keep them in her freezer. Like, she had this huge, like 6-foot wide deep freezer that she just had tons of cookies in, obviously a lot of other things too. But whenever we went there, she lived a few hours away, so whenever we went there, we would run to her freezer first and we would just bite into the cookies cold. And so you had this cold sugar cookie, and it was so good. Like, it just gives it a different texture and a different taste, and it's satisfying in a different way than obviously a hot gooey cookie is. And so I think that is kind of where I got the idea of a cold cookie. And now I have a few in the book and some on my website as well. One of my favorites is a chilled peach pie cookie. And so the cookie itself has oats in it, and it's baked at a low temperature, I think 325. And you pull it out when it's slightly underdone and then put it in the fridge so it continues to set up and finish in the fridge. And so since it's not baked at a high temp, you don't have like a crunchy hard cookie, because I feel like when most people hear chilled cookie, they think like, oh, that's going to break my teeth or not be a pleasant experience. But the oats in it make it really soft and keep it soft. And so you have this nice soft cookie that then it gets topped with, for the peach pie one, with a peach frosting and fresh peaches on top. And so it's like you're biting into a peach pie with a really thick crust on the bottom. And I think it is just so delightful. Like in the summer, when it's hot outside, biting into a chilled peach pie cookie is the best. And even when it's cold, my husband's favorite cookie maybe is the chilled chocolate chip cookie from the book. And kind of for those similar reasons, like it just is such a satisfying bite and gives you such a different experience than a hot and gooey cookie would, but it's really fun.
Yum. I am absolutely going to be making the chilled peach cookie. What about tips just universally for approaching cookies? As you said, you are somebody who kind of pushes people outside of their comfort zone, but very welcoming to brand new bakers. if you had to give like your top 3 tips for being successful when we're making cookies, what might they be?
I think that the biggest tip that I give to anyone that wants to bake is to buy a kitchen scale. They only cost like the one I've had it for years. It was $20 on Amazon, and it lasts forever and is really accurate, but it just makes baking in general so much easier and so much more reliable. And with cookies are a little more forgiving than most baked goods, but it still just makes it way more consistent, especially something like flour. I've had complaints or, feedback from people that say, oh, these cookies were too tough. And I ask, oh, well, how did you measure your flour? And, you find out that they pack it in the cup and shove it in, and then you have an extra 40, 50 grams of flour per cup, which is so much more flour. So using a baking scale will keep it consistent and will get you better results every single time. So I think that is a really good key. I think another tip would be to just try new things. I think there's some things that people are nervous of, like making toffee or making a certain frosting, and you might mess it up 1 or 2 times, but I think if you keep going, then it'll work out and you'll be really proud of yourself for doing something new. My last tip would be, and this is how to make really pretty cookies, but once your cookies come right out of the oven, because all the cookies in the book, I think, are just gorgeous, but one way to make them look really pretty is right when you pull them out of the oven, you get a round cookie cutter or biscuit cutter or even a cup or a bowl and just swirl it around the outside of your cookies. And then it brings in all those rugged edges and makes a perfect cookie that looks bakery worthy every time. And I feel like people know that hack a little bit, but I feel like there's plenty of people that don't know it yet, and it really, really transforms your cookies and make them all look perfect.
I had wondered when I was looking at your feet, I was like, God, they're all so perfect. And that's great. I'm definitely going to try that trick. Okay, so you have this book coming out. I think pre-orders are open and it's out in April. Is that correct?
Yes. Pre-orders are open. It's out April 14th. I'm so excited.
That's so exciting. Talk to me a little bit about that process. Because again, you young thing, you smart creator, you came up in this really digital world. I'm so curious about what the process has been like for you and sort of the highs and lows of writing a book with a publisher.
Writing a cookbook was something that I always wanted to do, but just thought that it would be something that came 5-10 years down the road. But when the opportunity presented itself, I was ecstatic. So the process kind of more granular for people that don't know, because I before had no idea. It's one of those things that you don't really know much about until you're in it and you're like, okay, now I know every single thing there is to know. But signed with a literary agent. She helped me put together my book proposal. And like I mentioned earlier, it just felt right to make it about cookies. That felt very different. There are cookie cookbooks out there, but they're not as common as just baking books or something like that. So put together a book proposal, went to all the publishers, ended up going with DK, and had a really, really great experience with them. But the process of writing a book all about cookies is very interesting. As you can imagine, it's difficult to come up with 80 different cookie ideas. So what I kind of did was come up with chapters first. So I knew I wanted a chapter all about chocolate chip cookies. I knew I wanted a chapter on the classics. I knew I wanted a chapter on unexpected flavors and the TV shows and movies chapter. So I kind of developed these chapters first, and then I was able to kind of brainstorm ideas that fit within those categories. And that helped it flow a lot easier and made it easier to get up to that 80 cookie count. But then, tested recipes for over a year. And so I was testing a couple cookies a day.
Did you want to die from all that sugar? I can feel it on my teeth. Thinking about
I just had to, and you obviously when you're testing a cookbook, you have to test different bake times, different methods, all these different things. And so even when I was testing one recipe, I was portioning out the dough and saying, okay, this one is baked at 350, this one's baked at 375, I'm topping this one like this, I'm topping this one like this, all these different variations. And so when it came time to taste test them, I would have the smallest sliver of each cookie because otherwise it's too much. I'm like, I can't be eating 10 cookies every day. I just can't do it. So I would have a sliver of each because I wanted to test them and, try every single iteration and see what really was best. But then all the extras went to family, friends, neighbors, coworkers. Like people really, really benefited from that year of testing. And sometimes I'd say, well, you can have cookies, but they're all like cut in half, or they have slivers cut out of them, but most people would take them anyway. So we shared a lot, and I shockingly like didn't burn out too badly while testing. Like I still was really excited, and I think there were just so many flavor combinations that I was really excited about trying and testing, so that kept the momentum. But when I was finished testing, I think it finally like hit me everything that I had done, and so I kind of crashed and took a break from baking cookies for like 3 months straight, which is very unlike me, but didn't touch a cookie for 3 months. And then I was feeling much better and was feeling ready to bake cookies again, and then I've been fine ever since then. So it was definitely a journey, and some cookies were a pain, but we finally got there, and other cookie flavor ideas that I have didn't quite work, so we ended up swapping them out. If something just couldn't work how I envisioned it, then we'd swap it out for a different flavor. So it took a lot of work, a lot of creativity, but I'm really, really happy with where we landed. And about the creator side, I think, at least for me, being a creator and writing a cookbook, I definitely think and feel like I am worthy to be writing a book, but I also feel like the imposter syndrome creeps up of like, I know there are other talented people that are more qualified than I am, or maybe have worked in a bakery for X number of years or these things. And so I feel like it's easy for me sometimes to feel that imposter syndrome creep up of like, well, who am I to do this thing? But I also have to remind myself that I do have a lot of experience, and I've learned so much, and I do feel like I have something to share with people. And so I hope that my perspective and approach will help a lot of people and bring joy to their lives.
I mean, that's the beautiful thing about the creator economy, is that we are seeing so many different voices. And girls, you said you just tested recipes for a year. You absolutely are qualified to write this book. And yeah, I'm sure it's just such an exciting milestone for you. And I feel you with the recipes not working. And I feel like it's not always the ones you think. I've been so humbled by the simplest recipe. And I'm like, why? And this is bringing me to my knees. Like, this is not a complicated recipe. It's totally crazy. So what was a recipe that you thought you had in the bag, and then it just broke you?
This one, I knew it would be a bit of a stretch, but I felt so confident that I could make it work. I wanted to make a mochi cookie. So either it was going to have mochi on the inside of the dough, because I've seen a couple cookies like that before, but I just couldn't get it to work. Like I was making the mochi and stuffing the dough, and I was doing it as mix-ins. Like I was trying all these different things, and I could get it to be really good for like the first couple hours, but then my mochi would always dry up and the cookie would be just kind of hard and tough. And so I tested that one so many times and just could never get it to work, but I just wanted it to work so bad. So I just had to finally tell myself that I needed to let it go and to move on. But that was definitely one that I really tried to make work. So maybe I'll come back to it someday, but I had to move on for the book because I had so many other recipes to test. Yes. So I had to leave that one behind, but that was one that I definitely thought I could make it work and was really excited about, but just it wasn't there.
Not the right time. So on the flip side of that, when we all go buy this book, what is the first recipe that, I know it's really hard to pick your favorite out of so many, but one or two that you think we should turn to first to kind of warm up and get introduced to your style if maybe we haven't baked your recipes before?
I think that one of my favorite cookies, and one that I've gotten some of the most positive feedback on, it's from a chapter that I have in the book called Turning Desserts into Cookies. And so, as the title implies, I take all my favorite desserts and make them cookie versions. And I have a banana pudding cookie that is really good. It's a vanilla wafer base. And so it has vanilla wafers crushed up and mixed in the dough and then rolled out on the outside of the dough. And then I make a pudding frosting that's really light and not too sweet. That's another thing you'll learn about me. I don't like things that are too sweet, which seems silly for someone writing a cookie book.
My mom is going to be thrilled with your recipes. She's like, not too sweet. Loves to bake, but not too sweet.
Yeah, it's like I add a good amount of salt to my cookies because I just hate when it's so overpoweringly sweet. So this pudding frosting is pretty light, not too sweet, and then it's topped with fresh bananas. And so it's a little bit of a fork and knife situation eating it, but you can, if they're small enough, you can just pound them. But it's a really fun cookie and totally reminds you of banana pudding because you've got this thick vanilla wafer cookie and then the pudding frosting on top that tastes just like what a pudding would taste like for banana pudding. So I think that one's really fun and one that is not complicated at all. Like the base cookie recipe is very simple, very straightforward. The pudding frosting, also very straightforward. The hardest part is like whipping heavy cream and then the fresh bananas on top. So it's a cookie that takes a lot of really easy elements, but gives you a really fun, different cookie. And then another cookie kind of on the different end of the spectrum, I have this chapter, as I mentioned, called Unexpected Flavors. And it is anything that you probably think doesn't belong in a cookie, I put it in a cookie. So like I have one that's a date, cheddar, and dark chocolate cookie. So it has shredded cheddar cheese in the cookie, which sounds crazy, but it just adds like a slight umami saltiness to the dough. Like you're not tasting it and thinking, wow, there's cheese in here. Like if you didn't tell anyone, they wouldn't probably be able to guess it. But that one's really fun. But the one that I'm thinking of is a chili crisp cookie, which also sounds insane. But I wanted to make a spicier cookie. And there's actually a couple of spicy cookies in the book, which is really fun. But this one, I didn't want the chili crisp to overpower the cookie. And so I decided to put it into a brittle. So it's kind of contained in these little small chunks. So there's a chili crisp brittle that's sweet and spicy and a little bit garlicky because of the chili crisp, which sounds crazy, but then it gets mixed in this dough that also has shredded coconut and toasted sesame seeds. And so there's enough going on that the chili crisp isn't totally overpowering, but the coconut and the sesame seeds really complement the chili crisp. And so it's still a very sweet cookie, but there's definitely like a spicy aftertaste, which I think is a really, really fun experience. So if you're going to make a cookie from the book, I would definitely at least make that one at some point. It doesn't have to be your first one if you wanted the more initial one, but that one is really fun and is something that you've probably never had before or experienced, but I think it's one that you'll be shocked by. And is there like a fun one if you're entertaining guests? You can have, a more traditional one, but one to have like a fear factor type, like try this cookie and see what you think type thing. So
honestly, Mallory, you don't have to sell me in either of those because first of all, I'm from New England. And so apple pie, you always have a slice of cheddar with it. So like obviously, and then I'm a huge Fly by Jing fan. I'm a huge fan of like many chili crisps, but since day one, Jing was always like, put it over vanilla ice cream. And I interviewed Roy Choi, who's a chef out in LA, like a million years ago. Yeah, it was so long ago, only the one restaurant at the time, but his pastry chef or someone over there, Natasha Fan, gave me this recipe to share in the Globe that had like the Szechuan peppercorns in the cookie dough. It was not spicy. It didn't have like the chili in it. It was more just the peppercorn with that zing. But that was sort of my first experience. But I think it's going to be a huge hit, and I'm excited to try both of those more adventurous cookies. Okay, so you are going to be talking about cookies till your mouth falls off, Mallory, because you're going to have a thrilling book tour and everyone is going to be wanting to chat with you about it. And I now am, of course, craving cookies. But I want to talk about some of the other parts of your food life because I know you've shared some of it on your Substack. Your husband is Japanese American, is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so he's half Japanese. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the mochi makes sense there. But I wanted to hear a little bit when you're not making cookies, like how do you cook at home? How do you cook for your family? And what other kind of flavors are you excited about?
Totally. Yeah, I definitely have a lot of Asian influence in my cooking. My dad lived in Japan for a few years when he was younger and is actually quite fluent in Japanese. And so I grew up eating a lot of Japanese food and learning a lot about the culture. And we had these like VHS tapes that we would watch of Japanese cartoons. And so I grew up with a lot of that culture. And then obviously I met Connor, and Connor's family, his grandparents were actually put in internment camps during World War II. And so they felt pretty, I think, fearful of associating with their Japanese culture. And so they didn't teach my father-in-law Japanese. And I think just out of necessity and fear, felt like they had to distance themselves from that. So ironically enough, my husband did not grow up with a lot of Japanese culture, but obviously has like the actual heritage part within him. And so it's been really beautiful to like meld both of our backgrounds together as we've been married and dating. And we both love the culture so much. And so we've been able to go back 3 times so far, and we eat Japanese food all the time. And we're teaching now our daughter all about it. And so that's been a really beautiful thing in our lives. And so I definitely take a lot of inspiration from Japanese food, and we're cooking Japanese food all the time. But I would say other than that, I like making things that are cozy yet healthy. And so I've done a few times a series on my social medias where I do bowls that taste good and make you feel good. And so one of my most popular ones is an herby chicken meatball bowl. And so it's these herby meatballs with roasted sweet potatoes and roasted chickpeas and kale and this really yummy like jalapeno herb dressing. And I love it. I could eat it all the time, and it's perfect for meal prep. Like whenever I make it, I make like a double batch so I can eat it and have it in the fridge. But I would say that's a pretty good example of what I like to do. So it's things that are still approachable and not too hard, but things that people will love to eat and that make you feel good. And there's definitely time and place for just cozy meals. But I would say that is the stuff that I mostly gravitate towards. And then on the weekends, I like to get into more lengthy and more elaborate meals, but those weeknights were busy. And so I try to keep that in mind as I'm developing recipes as well, because I know that I'm working from home all day and I could cook a meal every day that takes 2 hours, whatever. But most people do not have that. And so I try to keep my meals really approachable and satisfying.
That's great. And I'm sorry, Mallory, I'm still stuck on that story and like how that has to be your next book. Because what a beautiful through line. That's very cool. Well, I'm excited to try some of your savory recipes in addition to your cookies. I'm going to wrap up with what I call the busy brain section of the podcast. I have ADHD as evidenced by everything that I put on the internet. But one of my goals is to help people tap into their own creativity and then also calm the chaos in their brains when it comes to the kitchen. So for the busy brain section, I always ask 2 questions. One is, what is something that inspires you to get in the kitchen and start cooking when maybe you're not feeling so inspired? And then the second question is, what is one thing that calms the chaos for you? And it can be mental chaos or physical chaos, but allows you to just like really get grounded and get dinner done.
Yeah, one thing that really inspires me, and it's ironic with this conversation, is looking through cookbooks. And I think that is because when I was growing up, if I ever wanted to make a recipe, that my parents would hand me a stack of cookbooks and say, okay, what do you want to make? And I'd flip through them and I would earmark the pages and I'd be so excited because I wouldn't cook every night. You know, it was more of a special occasion thing that I would get to head up a meal. And so that always felt really special to me, flipping through these physical pages and earmarking something. And so when I'm in a slump for dinner or trying to think of what I want to make in the kitchen, I go to my cookbook shelf and I just look through books and sticky note them. And that is a way that I get really excited to either try a new technique or try a new recipe. So that is something that always keeps me excited. And then a way to calm the chaos, to-do lists are great. I love a to-do list. I think it makes it so much easier. It makes you feel less overwhelmed. It makes you, especially if you're, having someone over for dinner or something like that, having a to-do list has saved my life so many times and helps calm the chaos a lot. Another thing I would say is I always love to turn on music that I love while I cook. It just maybe like romanticizes the experience a little bit and makes it feel so much more fun and more calming. Even if my toddler is running around playing the entire time, it still just makes it a lot more fun and enjoyable. So I've been loving Olivia Dean for the past few years, or just whatever I'm feeling. But I feel like that also helps calm the chaos and makes the experience of cooking a lot more enjoyable as well.
Awesome. And I lied. I have one more question. You always have the most beautiful light in your videos, Mallory. What is your setup? Like, I know you don't want to give away all your secrets, but what is your, it's just so like, I feel like a cat curled up in front of a sunny window when I'm watching your videos in like the best way.
You're so kind. Where we live, the kitchen does not have like windows right by it. And so the kitchen itself is actually not very well lit, which is a bummer because I would love to just film in my kitchen. But I actually just film in the office that I'm sitting in right now. So there's a big window right here and the sunlight is on this side. And so it's right next to my kitchen. And so I just film in here and that's where I get good lighting. So it could be better if it was in my actual kitchen, but it's in my office right to the side of my kitchen. But I like when videos are very naturally lit and just feel really welcoming and warm. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, success. It's working. So Mallory, where can we find you? Handles, newsletter, pre-order your book. Tell us where to go.
Yes, please pre-order the book. You can pre-order it anywhere major books are sold, any independent booksellers, things like that. And it will come out April 14th, like we mentioned. And then social media, I'm at The Palatable Life. You can probably just search my name too. It should come up. And I do have a Substack. I am not super consistent on it yet. I would love to be at some point when the chaos calms down a little bit. But it's called Cookie Club on there. So the same as my cookbook, you can find me on there as well. Or you can probably just type in my name as well. So that is where to find me.
Well, Mallory, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I can't wait to try your chili crisp cookie and your peach pie cookie and your Gilmore Girls cookie. The list goes on.
That's what I want to hear. Thank you so much for having me.
And you. Thank you for taking the time to be here, and I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mallory. And the next time your sweet tooth strikes, I hope you give one of her recipes from the Cookie Club a try. Before we go, I do want to ask for one thing that would mean so much to me in the show. Please go to my website, katherinesmart.com, to keep in touch, subscribe to my newsletter, and follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you liked this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a cookie-loving, busy-brained friend. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Not From Concentrate is produced by me, Catherine Smart, with audio and video production by Kevin O'Connell. Allie Miller is our associate producer, and the theme music is by Kylie Daly.
This could happen to you.